My name is Bogdan Oldakowski. I'm the CEO of the company Actia Forum, who is organizing this webinar today. I would like to welcome you warmly at our webinar. Usually, we meet physically at Transport Week. This year, due to the obvious reasons, we are not able to meet here in Poland, in Gdynia. Well, we have a quite dense program today. We will talk about PPP projects in ports, specifically in Port of Gdynia. But before we go with the program, I would like to introduce to you our moderator of today, Antony van der Host, the Director of Commerce from company Maritime Transport and Business Solutions. Anthony, are you there and how are you doing?
I'm here, Bogdan. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for allowing me to moderate this session. I very much look forward to the session, and I also welcome my panelists of today, who will introduce themselves later on. I would like to give a special thanks to Transport Week, Actia Forum, and obviously the sponsor of today's session, Port of Gdynia. For the audience watching us on YouTube, there is a possibility to ask questions. I very much look forward to receive your questions as well, so I can ask them to the panelists later in this session. Thanks again for having me moderate the session, and I give the word back to you, Ms. Oldakowski, Bogdan, to enlighten us about the current status of trade to Poland and the region. Back to you, Bogdan.
Thank you very much. I was asked to give you a short presentation about the port market in the Baltic, but also in Polish port in Europe. So I will spend 10-15 minutes to give you some trends and statistics. But let me also say at the beginning that whole presentation was prepared for me by Ewelina Synak, who is our project assistant. So Ewelina, thank you very much for your help. Well, just a short introduction about the company. We are a small group. We are a consulting company, Actia Forum, but we also own majority of shares of the publication Baltic Press, and also we are founder of Foundation Motus. Well, when it comes to our area of the work, we do events like this. We do consulting projects. We also advise in EU projects and applications. Here is just a few photos from our events. So in the past, we did quite a lot of international events. Now we go for webinars, and we have already organized a few of them, and you can see some pictures on the right side. When it comes to our focus, we mainly work for ports, terminal, and shipping companies, but also environment and energy and alternative fuels are our specialists. And then we do market analysis, research, we do business plans, project management, and so on. This is the clients, and you could see that majority of them are coming from maritime transport, ports, terminals, shipping clients. Probably you know some of these names. When it comes to the presentation today, I have to say that majority of the data were taken from our Port Monitor series. So you could easily order this report and have a closer look at the port market in Europe, Baltic, or in Poland. But let me go to a presentation. Well, this is the nice map showing the Baltic port sector, and you can see many dots. The bigger the dot is, the bigger the throughput of the ports. So you could see that the biggest dots are lying in the Finnish Gulf. So this is namely Russian ports. If you look at the total statistics, you could see that there is no big change from year 2018 to year 2019. So the total throughputs of all Baltic ports are around 950 million tons. When it comes to the share of the market, of course, the largest share of the market belongs to Russia. Not surprising, they export quite many natural resources and also import quite many consumer goods. Then it's followed by Sweden, Finland, and Poland is on the fourth position, having around 10% of the share of the Baltic port market. Largest ports, again, three largest ports are Russian ports: Ust-Luga, Primorsk, Petersburg, then Klaipeda, Gdańsk, and on the 10th position there is Gdynia. And you could see that three main Polish ports are here, so they are included in the ranking of 10 largest Baltic ports. When it comes to the total turnover of the Polish ports, you could see the development over last 8 years, and you could see quite substantial increase of total cargo throughputs from around 60 million tons to more than 100 million tons of cargo during last 8 years. Well, let's go to the container market. I presume some of you know this map. This is the map showing the connections of the container big vessels, ocean-going vessels, and also feedering services in the north of Europe, including Baltic. So you could see many of those services going to the North Sea ports, Hamburg, Antwerp, Rotterdam, but also going to Gdańsk, then being distributed by the feeder services. And you could see the very nice loop system in the Baltic, reaching very north of the Baltic as well. Again, the largest portion of the market in this sector, in container sectors, not surprisingly, belongs to Poland, over 8%, followed by Russian and Swedish ports. Then if you see the 10 largest Baltic container ports, again, Petersburg and Gdańsk are on the top, having around 2 million of TEUs every year, then followed by Gdynia. Gdynia is on the third position, Göteborg, Klaipeda, Chamina Kotka, and others. If you see the comparison between the year 2018 and 19, you could see that there was a quite substantial increase of total throughputs of containers in the Baltic ports in year 2019 comparing to the previous year. Well, when it comes to European container market, then you could see again the 10 largest European ports, a bit similar pictures with three leaders: Rotterdam, Antwerp, and Hamburg. And then again, these blue colors are a bit larger than the other one. So the throughput in the year 2019 was higher than in the year 2018. Then Polish ports, Polish container throughput in ports. Again, over last 8 years, that was a quite substantial increase, very big, in fact, more than 80%. And also comparing the year 2019 to year 2018, that was 7.5% of growth. So quite substantial growth over last year in the Polish ports. When comparing this cake, you could see how big the dot is for Europe, which is 100%. And then Baltic is just around 12% of the European container market. Here we count the number of containers in ports, and then Poland, it's above 3%. So, of course, we are very excited at the development in Poland, but when comparing to whole markets, we are far from being a leader. We're just having around 3%. Well, this is the figures before pandemic. Let's see what happened during pandemic period, so this year. This is the, again, similar comparison, but in the first half of this year, comparing to the first half of the year 2019. So you could see that the drop of containers this year, this first half of the year, was not that huge in the leading ports, but sorry, this is the total cargo. I was just mistaken. This is the total cargo ports. So the total cargo ports was quite similar to the first half of the year 2019. Also in Polish ports, the drop of the total cargo was not that huge. And this is the changes over 3 quarters, and the quarters are shown on accumulated values. So first quarter is compared to the last quarter from previous year, and then two quarters and then 3 quarters of this year compared to 3 quarters of last year. So here you could see that the drop was quite huge in Gdańsk, and Gdynia kept almost the same level of total throughputs in their terminals. Again, going to the container market, the top European container, 10 top European container ports, you could see Rotterdam, Antwerp and Hamburg. Rotterdam and Antwerp, they lost quite a lot of containers, but when you compare Antwerp, when you see the Antwerp, the change is very small. So Antwerp kept almost the same level of throughput of containers. We could see also later that Barcelona and Le Havre, they lost quite many containers, around 20%, but I hope you can see it here also. Yes, this is the changes in 3 quarters. So you could see Antwerp is even having had more containers during the first quarter of this year than the previous year. Rotterdam lost around 5%, and Barcelona, Le Havre, almost 20% or even higher than 20%. So big decrease in these ports. Then Baltic ports, a bit similar story. So Petersburg, Gdańsk, also Gdynia had less containers in the first half of this year. Not surprisingly, a bit similar graph to the Baltic port, similar to European one. So in some ports like Klaipėda, Hamina Kotka, the drops was very huge. But in Polish ports, Gdańsk, Gdynia, the drops were around 6% in Gdańsk and 2-3% in Gdynia. And Petersburg also decreased around 6%. Well, here you could also see the drops of containers in the Polish sector, and then also by quarters. I think that there are so many statistics that I gave you, so maybe it's good to summarize this. So when looking at the market before pandemic in Europe, you could see that European ports were growing, but with the rather small number. Baltic market grew quite substantially by 3.6%, and Polish market, Polish market grew a lot by 7.5%. So very dynamic growth in Polish ports also over the last 8 years, almost 70%. Then during pandemic time, so this year, first half, we could see similar drops in all markets, European, Baltic and Poland, similar drops around 6-7%. And also we could see some recovery in third quarter. So the European market were recovering faster than Baltic and Polish markets. But what happened after pandemic? I would say, who knows? First of all, in a short term, probably the current new restrictions that we are having now in Europe, also in Poland, will affect the fourth quarter of this year and possibly at least some of the year 2021. In midterm, in 2-3 years, we can't say too much at the moment. We are at the time of our certainty. So this very much depends on the restrictions that will be implemented. In long term, of course, the future is unknown, but the recession slowdown will probably not last forever. Polish ports, comparing, I mean, if you look at the statistics from last decade, you could say that we are, as a Polish port, we were developing rather quick. So I would say we are having still a rather positive outlook, assuming that the slowdown and recession will end up sooner or later. I have just again like to turn your attention to this report, to yearbook published by Baltic Transport Journal, and to Port Monitor, our products, and those statistics were given from these reports. Of course, we would be glad to meet you physically, but it's not really the case this year. Let's see how things will develop, but please follow our marketing tools, and as soon as we are and the world is ready, we will organize Transport Week physically. So this is a presentation. I hope I didn't give you too much of numbers, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the container and port market in Europe, Baltic, and Poland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bogdan. I actually think you were giving nice numbers and important numbers, especially looking at the topics we will discuss later, focusing obviously on the developments in Gdynia. I think it will be very important for the audience to know the status of the Polish markets, the huge growth it has experienced in the past, and how it is dealing with COVID-19. So again, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. As a moderator, I do have the liberty always to ask a few questions myself. I also encourage all the audience to submit any questions they may have. Looking at your presentation, Bogdan, I noticed the total Polish markets to be approximately 3 million, a bit more than 3 million TEU. I also am aware of all these fairly large developments which are taking place or are anticipated in Poland, including obviously the outer port, but also central port in Gdansk, the further development of DCT, and the recent launch of the tender in, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Szczecin-Świnoujście. What is your view on these developments? What any investors, the investors that are now looking at this webinar, what projects should they focus on your view?
This is a very good question, and I don't have a very precise answer. I would say that the expectations and the forecasts for the Polish container markets are quite positive, or even maybe very positive, assuming that the pandemic will end someday. So in general, I would say that there is a market, and of course those projects that you mentioned in Gdańsk, Gdynia, and Świnoujście are very, I would say, exciting, and I know that the serious investors are looking at this projects and trying to make the decisions whether they are for them or not. I'm not in the position to say which one is better or which one is worse. I think in general the market is there, and the prospects for Polish container terminal, Polish container market are very positive. So sorry, I won't give you a more precise answer.
I hereby would like to introduce our next presenter, Mr. Maciej Ziomek, Associate Partner with Ernst & Young. Please, Mr. Ziomek, you have the word.
Hello, good morning once again. Maybe I will this time, we'll make the introduction a bit shorter and focus on the presentation. So today I'm going to talk about Port's take on investment, investor mood, and an overall approach towards new projects in the light of current world events. Basically, infrastructure is core element for every economy, and especially transport infrastructure is crucial for development of each economy. It is estimated that the need for further infrastructure investments, including new infrastructure and replacement of existing ones, is at the level of approximately 3.5% of global GDP. And currently, the world spending is a bit lower than that. So it's definitely crucial to attract private capital to invest in infrastructure. We can use Global Hub statistics to see what are the spending of the private sector on infrastructure. We can see that over the last decade, the investments of private sector in primary markets, so without secondary market transactions, decreased. But still it's at the level of approximately $100 billion annually. We can see that Europe is one of the most important regions for such investments. And if we have a look in particular sectors, transport is one of the leading ones. And if we focus more on subsectors, we can see that road and rail projects, including tunnels and bridges, are majority of private infrastructure investments. If we have a look at ports and maritime infrastructure, we can see that there was a significant drop after 2016. This can be explained by a number of events impacting the maritime sector. The key drivers for investments in this sector is, first of all, it's all about traffic. A lot has been said about traffic on the Baltic Sea and Europe, so I'm not going to focus on this. It's obvious. There's obvious link between investments and the traffic. The next factor, which is crucial for new investments, is basically increasing and rapid growth of capacity of vessels, especially container ship. We can see that over the past 10-50 years, the capacity of container ship increased significantly. And this, of course, requires additional investments on the port side in order to have good infrastructure, good assets that would be capable to operate with such larger vessels. Of course, the situation on the shipping market is also of great importance with regards to new investments. We could spend a whole day talking about this, so just a few words. What is important right now is huge inactive container ship capacity, which is caused by COVID-19 outbreak, which is also impacting the fees and the charges and World Container Index. This was basically one of the reasons why investment stopped after 2016, when this World Container Index was at a very extreme low level. Okay. Private investors invest in infrastructure not because they love infrastructure, but first of all because it offers profits. And investment in infrastructure could be very interesting asset class, offering reasonable return for, in some of the cases, even when lower risk, like in terms of listed infrastructure. But also in the case of some unlisted infrastructure, it can produce even higher results. So we cannot comment on the current situation and the impact of COVID-19 on returns on such investments. Currently, if we have a look at some indexes for unlisted equities, we can see that after 3 quarters of this year, there's a significant drop in negative returns. What is crucial here is to point out that there is huge difference between so-called merchant infrastructure return and contracted infrastructure. Merchant infrastructure is this type of assets which bears the commercial risk. So if there is no traffic, there is huge problem compared to contracted infrastructure, which is more based on availability payment based. So this merchant infrastructure is mainly impacting investments like airports or toll roads or ports as well, which are focused on which are heavily impacted by COVID-19 and drop in the traffic level there. So what we have learned so far from this pandemic COVID-19, we can have a look on what's happening in Asia. There seems to be a bit ahead of us in terms of fighting against pandemic. So we observed that there were delays in the ports, there was decreased maritime trades, delayed customs and port clearance, so many issues impacting the operations. At the same time, in ports experienced huge volatility. So on the one hand side, there was a slowdown of port economy, but at the same time, there was a shortage of container stacking yard and warehousing capacity constraints. This was because of the drop in demand in the hinterland for some of the goods, which were already transported to the ports and had to be stored somewhere. So the lesson learned from this is that the situation would require in the future more integrated transport systems, focusing more on digitalization and automatization. But first of all, this crisis would significantly impact the global supply chains. We can have a look at the results of Euromoney survey, which raise this question. So what could be the impact of COVID-19 outbreak on supply chains? And it seems that 83% of managers interviewed are expecting significant changes in the location of production facilities, in a sense that we will most likely replace offshoring with a nearshoring. So this would definitely impact the maritime traffic. From a perspective of countries like Poland, this can be, however, beneficial, because if we say about nearshoring from the EU or EU countries, we would be speaking about countries like located in Eastern Europe. So from this perspective, this greater focus on nearshoring could be even require even better infrastructure on our side and focus on new investment projects. Let's see what happened on the port side. There was a survey conducted by International Port Association and Harbors. It started just after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. There were several surveys already conducted. The last one included additional question about ports' approach to new infrastructure projects, and it seems that in the case of 69% of surveyed ports, majority of their investment plans has been delayed or changed in some way. But if we have a look more into the details, we can see that delay in 41% of responses was only minor. and only approximately 7% of seaports declares that their projects were cancelled or replaced by other investments. If we have a look at Europe, this view is even more optimistic. So in the case of 57% of responses, we can see that investments are executed as planned, and only 29% of ports declares some minor delays in project realization. This survey was conducted based on 85 answers, and Europe was also well represented in this survey. So we can kind of treat this as representative. And what this survey proves is that investment in infrastructure is a long-term investment. So we can obviously expect that if we have investments for decades, for 20, 30, 40 years, we can expect events like this to happen over this long period of time. So the decision about such project cannot be made only based on current events, but long-term perspective needs to be taken into account. Of course, it don't have to be the case for all the investments being considered. Like Belfast Harbour declares that some of their investment plan needs to be stopped for some time, mainly due to the fact that cruises and tourist and leisure activities that are crucial for this port are not existing as for the moment, and now it's hard to say when it would be back. At the same time, we see that there are ongoing privatization projects. One of them is Port of Haifa. Another good example is privatization of 10 regional ports in Greece. And what is very interesting, those processes have been initiated basically in the middle of pandemic, so around July. And quite recently in October, there was a deadline for submission of initial offers. And it seems that in both transactions, they received, there was significant interest from potential private investors. So this also proves that there is also confidence on the private side that this situation cannot last forever. And while we are talking about long-term investments, we need to focus on the longer perspective. Some additional data for this. Based on 3/4 of this year, we can see that the fundraising of infrastructure funds is even higher compared to the previous year and some of the previous years. So it also shows that there's confidence among investors. Over last few weeks, when preparing this presentation, I had a chance to speak to a number of investors, and I always ask this question: what's your approach? What do you think about the situation? And what was very positive, usually the answer was the same. So we are talking about long-term investments. The preparation of this project and realization of the project will take years. So hopefully, before we commence operations in those projects that we are considering right now, we would almost forget about COVID-19. I hope this would be the reality, and future projects will prove that there is still confidence among investors. There are some few cases of such actions, not only declarations, but I'm afraid we are running out of time, so I will end up with this positive information that it seems that in a long-term perspective, it seems that investors are in a quite good mood. Of course, cautious in terms of some specific investments, but hope that this would not change soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ziomek, for the very interesting presentation on the investor mood, the investor market, focusing obviously on ports, which is the topic at hand. I take the liberty of asking a single question because we're running a bit short on time. You act as an advisor to Port of Gdynia. Looking at this investor market, what are the investors you would like or wish to attract for the outer port deal? Could you give us your view on this?
Well, I would say that every investor is well welcomed in the process, regardless of the type of this investor. If we have a look at the characteristics of the particular project which would be based on a concession, so that the revenue from this project, it needs to be generated from end users. So it's crucial to have a top class port operator in this project for this to be successful. At the same time, many infrastructure funds proved that there could be very efficient in terms of preparation and realization of such projects. So having such investor would be very beneficial. And at the same time, construction of such project, of such terminal is not an easy task. So having the right and experienced construction company that would support the project would be also well welcomed. So I would say that my dream consortium would include all those types of investors in this process.
So summarizing, a construction firm, a infrastructure fund, and a well-established terminal operator.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation and a very clear answer to the question. I obviously look very much forward to the presentation of Port of Gdynia to understand more about the project at hand, the project we are discussing also today, the outer port development. I would like to give the word to Port of Gdynia, Mr. Maciej Kryczynski. I hope I pronounced it correctly. I look very much forward to your words and presentation. Please, the word is with you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome very warmly in Port of Gdynia Authority. I would like to say about our port, about our case in a few words. Please give me 1 minute. Okay. I share my screen. Okay, if we talk about the Port of Gdynia, we have to talk a few words about the Port of Gdynia generally. And the history of Port of Gdynia began in 1922. We rise from the small village to the port. You can see on your right hand. And after that, today we are one of the biggest port in the Baltic Sea, and of course one of the biggest in Poland. Last year we handled near 24 million tons of cargo handling. As you can see, it's still rising, and I suppose that this year we achieve the same level of the cargo handling in this such difficult situation, because as you know, we have COVID, and in general the situation is not very good. But in our port we can say that the cargo handling is rising and rising. Of course, we have direct connections with the many ports in the Baltic Sea and in the North Sea. Especially, we have very good connections with Finland, with Sweden, and we have very good connections if we talk about the short sea with Great Britain. So I can say that we are very good prepared for the Brexit. Two main Ro-Ro and Ropax services to Karlskrona and to Hanko. But of course, the main problem and main area is how to achieve our main goal in the next 8 to 10 years. We want to have ocean connections with the Asia, with the North and Middle and South America ports. Of course, today we have the connections with this port in the rest of the continents, but we talk about the general cargo, not about the containers. We want to have containers connections. What we can say about the Port of Gdynia? We are in the middle of the Europe, so we have a very good connections with the new Silk Road. If we talk about the rail connections, we are on as a main point of the Baltic-Adriatic corridor, and of course we have a motorway of the sea to Karlskrona, between Gdynia and Karlskrona, and as I told before, we have very good connections to the North Sea, and the Baltic corridor is one of the main corridor which we serve. Maciej Ziomek told us that the containers vessels are larger and larger. I suppose that in the near future we can say about the containers more or less capacity of these vessels will be 30,000 TEU, maybe over 25,000 TEU. We will see. But from the 1917, when the containers generally started, today we can say that we started from the 1,000 or 2,000 and half TEU up to over 20,000 in 2015. Last year we have in Port of Gdańsk MSC Gursun. It was over 24,000 TEU. So today we have a main goal to can serve the biggest vessel what are on the Baltic Sea and what sailing on the seas and on the oceans. In few words about our main investment, port rise on the sea. We can say that about the outer port. This is the first stage here, and the second stage will be here in the basin 2 of our port. But the first stage is here, and this is the stage what we are working just now. We talk about the 151 hectares of the new land, completely new land on the Gdańska Bay. We want to have over 2 kilometers of the wasteland, and it will be more or less 4 berths for the biggest vessels on the Baltic Sea, on the Baltmax. It is possible that at the end of the terminal there will be maybe a different kind of the terminal. Not everything will be for the containers. Maybe on the end of the terminal will be, for example, offshore terminal or maybe a cruise terminal. We will see. It depends from the private partner and from the discussion with the private partner. We want to be prepared for the largest vessels. Maximum length will be in the first stage up to 430 meters, and the maximum drop will be 60 meters. So today we know that maximum drop in the Baltic Sea for the vessels in the Baltic Sea is 15.5, but we want to have maximum drop up to 16 meters with the possibility of dredging in the next stage up to 70, maybe more. Of course, a very good port will not exist without the dedicated road infrastructure. So we talk about the red road here, and we talk about the hinterland, about the logistic facilities, logistic valley. And the next one is dedicated rail infrastructure. It's over 130 kilometers of tracks and over 355 crossovers. And I can say that this part of the investment is ongoing project. Just now, PPPRK just now prepared the new rail connections, and it will be prepared especially not only for the rest of the Port of Gdynia, but for the outer port too. This is the reserve land of the east of the outer port. It will be at 10 of the railways here. The capacity without of the outer port, we expect that it will be not more than 2.3 million TEU. But if we build outer port, it will be rising up to 4.8 million tons. And I think that it's enough for the next maybe 30, maybe 50 years. Of course, the very important for us, because our owner is the state, so the state treasury annual income, it will be more or less between 3 and 4 billion PLN. It's very important because it allowed us to invest maybe next money for the future, for the next project in our port. And of course, very important, 700 of new jobs in the outer port, and more or less over 4,000 people in the outer port surroundings. Innovations, development, passions, this is what we do just now. This is the most important project for us, for Port of Gdynia. So if you have any questions, please ask. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I think we now get a short video, if I'm correct.
Budowa portu zewnętrznego praktycznie podwoi obecną powierzchnię zajmowaną przez terminale operacyjne w porcie Gdynia.
W przypadku takiej inwestycji kluczowa jest współpraca pomiędzy Zarządem Morskiego Portu, którego rolą jest stworzenie właściwych warunków, czy to w zakresie właściwego dostępu drogowego i kolejowego do portu. Z drugiej strony partner prywatny jest konieczny do zapewnienia sukcesu dla tego projektu. Tym partnerem prywatnym musi być światowej klasy operator, który będzie w stanie przyciągnąć do Gdyni ładunki.
Z tym projektem odniesie wiele innych korzyści dla innych przedsiębiorców, dla regionu i dla całego kraju.
Port zewnętrzny będzie miał fundamentalne znaczenie dla regionu i dla wszystkiego, co dzieje się w całym obrębie Bałtyku. Bez takiej inwestycji będzie bardzo trudno konkurować z Göteborgiem, będzie bardzo trudno konkurować z Kłajpedą. Musimy być coraz bardziej nowocześni, musimy umożliwiać dostęp najnowszym, największym statkom, jakie pływają po oceanach.
To jest przedsięwzięcie, które tak naprawdę otwiera nową historię w działalności portu w Gdyni. Teraz porty morskie są wielofunkcyjnym organizmem, który oprócz funkcji transportowych łączy w sobie funkcje przemysłowe, handlowe, logistyczne. Jest też stymulatorem rozwoju gospodarki całego kraju.
Jest to olbrzymia dźwignia dla przemysłu i też kolejna szansa rozwoju dla Gdyni.
Gdynia, jak wiadomo, jest portem o strategicznym znaczeniu dla gospodarki. Dzięki bardzo takiej silnej współpracy z Ministerstwem Funduszy i Polityki Regionalnej i oczywiście innymi ministerstwami udało się pozyskać finansowanie na infrastrukturę dostępową od strony morza.
Polityka proekologiczna, którą realizuje Port Gdynia, również jest naprawdę godna podziwu. Polityka w ramach idei Green Portu, najnowocześniejszy na świecie i jednocześnie najbezpieczniejszy na świecie system nawigacji statków, który notabene jest również bardzo proekologiczny. To wszystko składa się na jedną całość i uzasadniało przyznanie nagrody dla Portu Gdynia i dla jej sternika.
Przyjęcie pierwszego statku to jest mniej więcej 2028 rok.
poprzez zbudowanie portu zewnętrznego Gdynia wróci do tej idei, do tej koncepcji, która przyświecała inżynierowi Wędzie i ministrowi Kwiatkowskiemu, że każdy statek, który wpłynie na Bałtyk, wpłynie również do portu Gdyni.
Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski, for the very interesting presentation. I've written down a few numbers: 151 hectares, 2.5 million TEU, and a key length of 2.3 kilometers. It is really an impressive project. It is a very big project, and obviously it is a very interesting project given the presentation we received from Bogdan in the vibrant Polish market, which has shown tremendous growth in the last decade, not considering COVID-19. So no doubt you will have many interested parties looking at this project. Thanks again for this very interesting presentation. We now move on to our panel discussion. And in the panel discussion, we will have two additional participants whom I would like to ask to briefly introduce themselves. We have of the Polish Ministry of Development Funds and Regional Policy, Ms. Liliana Bogus. Maybe you can briefly introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in today's event. My name is Liliana Bogus. I'm the head of Central Governmental PPP unit, which is based in the Ministry of Regional Funds and Development, as it was already initiated. I will tell a bit more about the role of our unit during the panel itself. I'm extremely happy to be part of this project development, both personally but also institutionally. And I strongly believe that this is a great opportunity for Polish economy to contribute worldwide, but not only with the regard of economic development itself, but also with regard to fighting with COVID pandemic economic downturn. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your brief introduction. We also have on the panel Ms. Alina Sarnacka, owner of Alina Sarnacka Consulting, which is a boutique PPP advisory firm. Could I please ask you to introduce yourself briefly?
Good morning. Indeed, I'm the owner of a boutique PPP advisory firm. I'm a freelancer now, but I've been involved in PPP for the past 25 years, most of it in prime consulting companies. I've advised on PPPs in various sectors. Currently, I'm a member of the Port of Gdynia PPP team, and it's the first port PPP project that I'm involved in Poland, because it's the first PPP project in the port sector in Poland. However, I worked on two other port PPPs in other locations. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this forum and in this panel.
Thank you as well for the introduction. I encourage the audience watching on YouTube to pose any questions you may have. These will be transferred to us, and we are happy to put them to the panelists. Obviously, as moderator, I take the liberty to ask a few questions myself. And following the presentation by Port of Gdynia, I would like to also ask the Port of Gdynia a question first, just for your information. Obviously, Mr. Giomek and Mr. Kaczynski are also joining the panel discussion. So it will be a panel discussion amongst all of us. My first question actually is maybe a repeat of the question I asked to Bogdan as well. But it would be good for us, and I think also for the audience, to understand what makes this outer port project unique vis-a-vis the other port developments in Poland. When we look at Gdansk outer port, perhaps further development of DCT, and the recent launch of the tender in Świnoujście. Could you maybe, Mr. Kaczynski, elaborate a bit your view on this, please?
Yes, I can say that first of all, the project is not intended to compete directly with the similar undertakings in Poland. The biggest competitors for the outer port in Gdynia are German, Lithuanian, and other terminals in the Baltic Sea basin and part of the North Sea. However, I believe that compared to the project of a similar nature known to me, the outer port is today best prepared to obtain the partner for its construction and in a highly competitive manner. Today we have closed all environmental analysis. We are at this stage of the announcing of a tender to select a private partner. It's very important for us. It should also be emphasized that of all Polish projects, the project in Gdynia is characterized by the most compact investment cost and the relation to the size of the infrastructure build. It's not, I can say that it's not too big or too small. It is also worth emphasizing that it's the only port that has today warranted financing for the necessary access infrastructure. If we talk about, especially about the breakwaters, and the protective breakwaters have financing and rail access is basically already being implemented as a part of the reconstruction of the Gdynia port station. So this makes this project extremely attractive for the potential investors.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very clear answer. It is also very important to note that the financing for the breakwater, as I understand, and as you mentioned, has been secured.
Yes,
which is
it's most important because I know that in the technical dialogue, many of investors ask about that at the last stage. So just now I can say that we have the financing for the breakwaters. We have ongoing project in our port with the rail connections. So yes, I can say yes.
Okay, that is important and good news. I would like to ask Ms. Bogus a specific question, and you elaborated on that already briefly. I think it is important for the viewers to understand what is the role of the Ministry of Development Funds and Regional Policy in this project. And what is the role of the Ministry of Finance in securing of public side financing? I would assume that looking at the presentation of Port of Gdynia, a lot of funds need to be obtained to finance the road, the rail, and the breakwater, as we just discussed. So I'm looking very much forward to an answer on that question.
Thank you very much for this question. As I already mentioned, I represent Central Governmental PPP unit, and the main role and the main involvement of our unit is to support public authorities in Poland entering PPP development projects. And we are trying to get involved as early as it is possible. In case of this outer port project, we were involved at the stage of selecting international advisors. We believe that it's extremely important for each PPP project to be supported by a experienced advisory team, and we always underline that we try to follow worldwide international standards and apply them to Polish market. And I believe that this is one of the advantages of this project. We also, as a central governmental PPP unit, implement PPP guidelines for Polish projects. And also with regard to this project, we keep an eye on all the procedures. We try to make them as transparent and as international standard based as it is possible, which is, I believe, happening from the early beginning, starting from, for example, from market testing procedures, which were also taken in this project. Why is it so important to get support for public authorities by means of my team, my employees? You probably know that PPP formula is something not well understood or maybe not well developed in Poland. So each separate project, in order to be bankable, in order to meet expectations of private partners, needs to balance both risks but also responsibilities of both of the parties. So Our role is to try to lead, to try to support public authority, and to shape the project the way that it will both address the expectations of public interest, but at the same time to attract international world-class private partners acting on the market. So this is the role of our ministry. This is the role of our team to be kind of second eye actor of this process, to support public authority, both in terms of cooperation with advisory team, but also in terms of cooperation with international markets. As a governmental unit, we also try to be active in cooperation with other ministries, and you also mentioned the Ministry of Finance, which played an active role during the process of securing the state funding for the public infrastructure, access infrastructure from the sea to this project. And we also believe that it was a very, very successful process in terms of acting as an intermediary and explaining for the Ministry of Finance the role of PPP formula in this project. So the contribution of central PPP unit, I think, is not questionable at all, and we try to act on similar basis and other units acting in other European but also other countries in the world. And following all international standards, we really believe that such a strong team gives an ability for such well-developed and well-prepared project to success, meaning to find the successful cooperation and simply to sign PPP contract at the end of this long process. And I must say that we are convinced that the cooperation between all the teams within this project, I mean the advisory team, but also very committed and very dedicated team in Port of Gdynia Authority, is also the contribution to the successful track of each PPP project. And I always say when I'm given the word that all the aspects like bankability or division of risks and responsibilities or even drafting the PP contract is a challenge, but you can easily solve all the problems while you have dedicated, well cooperating team. And I believe this is the biggest strength of this project.
Thank you very much. I hear words which I really appreciate: bankability, splitting risks evenly, and making sure that they're split in a way it's workable for both private and public party. I agree with you. It is critical to make a successful deal. Obviously, I think myself, but also a lot of viewers are very keen to see the RFP to understand what it will look like. I think there's still quite some questions, because looking at the Polish market, obviously there is different regimes or ways how to deal with private operators. ICTSI, Hutchinson and Disport, and then again DCT Gdansk, all have their own peculiar and specific deal with the government, which makes creating, I think, a level playing field a challenge. But I think myself and all the others look forward to having more information from the RFP. I have a question from the audience, which I would like to ask to Port of Gdynia. Does the Port of Gdynia plan to apply any EU funds for the access infrastructure development?
Yes, it is possible, but it's not necessary to finish this project, I can say. But yes, it is possible that we will apply for the EU funds. This is possible to do it together with the PPP formula. Yeah.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. And I would like to ask a question to Ms. Sarnacha. Having working on this deal and having worked, as I understand, on other PPP formulas in ports and other projects, could you share what, in your view, are the main benefits of using a PPP from a Polish government or public sector perspective?
There are numerous benefits, especially at the hard times of pandemics. Most governments suffer from insufficient funds, as I mentioned, especially now when public funds have been transferred from infrastructure investments to fighting the pandemics, to the health sector. And PPPs are a solution that transfer investment costs from the public sector to the private sector. But that's not all. There are additional benefits. As already mentioned, there is a transfer of some of the risks that private sector may better control from the government. There is additional benefits that private sector is responsible for financing of the project. However, there is another key issue and a key objective in delivery of PPPs, namely the PPPs are meant to deliver the value for money. Value for money means that PPP projects are obliged to provide the optimum combination between the benefits and costs of delivery of projects when transferred from public to the private sector. In order to establish that the project indeed contributes the value for money, a very comprehensive assessment is needed. It's called the project appraisal process. And during this project appraisal process, there are a number of individual analyses made. The market, I mean, not to mention all, but mainly the technical analyses, the market sounding, the demand analyses, and particularly the economic and financial analyses. And only those projects that have proven value for money should be implemented. I would like to underline that in case of Port of Gdynia, the appraisal report has been completed. And in an unequivocal manner, it proves the value for money for this project. And it has been approved by the members of the Polish government. Also, in view of all of the above, the PPP projects have sort of a quality of being quasi-regulator. It means that the basic components of a project like design, build, finance, operate, manage, are transferred to the private sector. However, it's the public sector that sets initial assumptions, that controls and the delivery of the project. And also there's a very important a very important stakeholder that's involved in the project, that's financing institutions. And the financing institutions also have its say in verifying the viability of this project, and via various contractual provisions of controlling the delivery of a PPP projects. It must be mentioned that other contractual structures that involve public and private corporations, like, for example, various leases, which also have their place in the overall public-private market. They have, from the also legal and practical point of view, that usually do not provide the possibility for assessment of basic benefits to the public market before they start. Usually, although it seems that there's a possibility of including certain provisions in the lease contracts, the lessee should have assume major risk. In case of a lease, a lot of risks cannot be transferred to the public sector. Otherwise, it will become a concession or a PPP project. And also, the public sector has a limited capacity to monitor the performance of the lessee. Hence, also, although the PPP process involves very meticulous preparation at the beginning, and generally the preparation is more timely and more expensive, there are clear benefits to other public and private cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the team which is presented here, including EY, the Ministry of PPP, yourselves, and Port of Gdynia, no doubt that is the experienced team you need to make this deal successful. So thank you for your elaboration. I truly believe a value for money analysis should be part of any true PPP assessment. So I fully concur with you on that one. I would like, so thank you again for your question. I would like to go to EY, to Mr. Jomek. We have previously actually joined EY in making a successful deal in Ukraine for USPA, Ukraine Seaport Authority. 2 successful transactions were completed last year in Olvia and Gerson, which we actually did jointly, and including some, obviously other advisors as well. We had our challenges there, and no doubt there will be challenges in this project. If I may ask, what is, in your view, what are the biggest pitfalls or risks you anticipate in this particular project? Could you elaborate on this one?
Well, first of all, I would say that the biggest challenge for this project would be to properly address the traffic risk, so the demand risk. Currently, we know that there is an existing competition, there are existing projects, so we need to be conscious in a sense that setting up the requirements for the cooperation for this project should be structured in a sense that would allow the private partner to be beneficial due to the increasing traffic. At the same time, sharing profits with Seaport Authority if this project will end up very successful. But at the same time, if the project would have some difficulties at the very beginning, at the start, there should be also some kind of support or risk sharing on the public side. So I would say that this would be the crucial element to find the right balance between the let's say the proper balancing of this traffic risk. First of all, this is based on Polish regulations and practice. The port operations, the terminal operations are dedicated for private partners. So the Seaport Authority, based on regulations, cannot do it by themselves. So the private partner is better positioned to be successful in this aspect. But at the same time, there should be enough support from the public side in order to make this project successful. I would say that this project is going to be focused mainly on concession approach, which is a result of our approach that we want this project to be successful in a sense of successful operations, not just to have an asset. It's not about construction and having the asset. It's about having successful terminal. Therefore, we need to consciously set the right balance between public and private sides to enable to provide the private partner with enough comfort to invest in this project. And based on our discussions that we had till now with a number of potential partners, we are pretty sure that we will find this right solution.
Very curious, obviously, to understand what the solution will be. No doubt you will shed some light on this in the RFP tender documents. Maybe some, and I'm just looking if there's no questions from the audience. The outer port development will compete with not specifically, as I understand it, new developments in Poland, but with other Baltic ports, Klaipėda, Göteborg, and possibly Western European ports. Now, specifically looking at these ports, one can observe that for these ports, the infrastructure is generally built by the Port Authority. So I'm talking about the quay wall, the land reclamation, and the likes. And then I have a question to Port of Gdynia, to Mr. Kaczynski. Could you shed some light on how you will ensure in this PPP that, since a lot of the investment risk is shifted towards the private operator vis-à-vis the competing ports and terminals in Western Europe, but also, for example, Klaipėda, how you will make sure that this port will be able to compete with these other ports?
I think that the most important risk is the risk of the traffic. So that is why we are looking for the very strong operator for the new outer port. And of course, if we talk about this kind of investment, I think that the main decisive factor is in this type of investment is of course to ensure a rate of return that is satisfactory for the investor. The effectiveness assessment that was performed during the preparatory work before the tender showed clearly that the NPV or IRR factor or indicators of the project are attractive, and their value even exceeds to the indicators reported as reference or expected by investors during the technical dialogue. I would like to say that, of course, in the preparation phase, we had two technical dialogues. So this kind of questions, of course, was very important for us. Generally, the PPP model was also tested as part of the performance assessment and compared with the traditional concession model. Also, this part of the analysis clearly showed that for this type of project and this scale of the project, the most appropriate model is the model of public-private partnerships. This model allows a very clear approach joint project implementation and of course the share of the risks in the most effective way. That is why, as I remember, Maciej Ziomek told us that it is the best way to share the risk which is more suitable to the private partnership or public partnership. That is why we do it in the PPP formula.
Okay, I think that is a very clear answer. I've heard a mentioning of a good IRR and a good NPV, which are obviously very important. I've heard Ms. Bogus earlier on referencing to bankability, which is obviously also critical for any successful deal. So I would like to go back maybe as a final question before I give the word back to Bogdan. What is Ms. Bogus, what is in your view are the main benefits for the private party in a PPP structure in Poland? Being a new structure for ports, could you elaborate on this in a bit more detail?
Thank you for this question. Well, no doubt, during the situation we are facing, investors are looking for the best projects. However, we also talked today about it, that the project of Outer Port of Gdynia has to be assessed having in mind longer perspective, because we are talking about a long-term investment. And there was a report published recently by International Monetary Fund where they were assessing current today's abilities and opportunities for private investments, and they've paid a great focus on Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe. So we believe that Poland is part of this geographical location where we perceive Poland as a very, very attractive country for international investors. And in particular, those investors, they look for long-term return. And Outer Port of Gdynia, this is the perfect opportunity for such investors. There's also another important aspect that we haven't touched probably today, which is referring to sustainable development. We know that the awareness of the investors, both financial but also institutional investors, puts a great focus on SDG goals, and the port itself perfectly fits this idea. Also following the European Commission ambitious and standards to switch from, for example, traditional transportation forms to modal transport. And again, the investment in port infrastructure is well fitted for these expectations. And what is also important, the Gdynia investment is part of the wider strategy. It's not only development of port itself, but also what was mentioned by Mr. Krzesinski. It's also the idea of enhancing the train, railway connections and road connections. In the future, also, the government declares to improve the inland water connections. So talking about the development of the logistic in this region, in the area of Baltic Sea region, we strongly believe that competition is the key, but also cooperation within all this transportation mode is a key to success. And we strongly believe that this is also the point of view that will be taken into consideration by international investors to switch into this complex mode of transport in the whole Europe, focusing mostly on this infrastructure gap in Central Eastern Europe, and switching a little bit from well-developed and infrastructure in Western Europe.
Thank you for the very clear answer. I think we have, during this panel session, touched upon several very interesting projects. Obviously, we discussed the project at hand. We gave a view on the public as well as the private perspective. We discussed the pitfalls and the main risks. So no doubt it is an important and good takeaway for the audience watching. Thank you for joining the panel. Thank you for allowing me to moderate the panel. I would like to give the word to Bogdan for some closing remarks. Thank you again.
Thank you, Anthony. I think I should say big thanks to Anthony for moderating this session and especially for the panel. It was really interesting topics discussed during the panel. So Anthony, thank you very much. And all the speakers, thank you very much. I would like to also thank Port of Gdynia for cooperating with us, for sponsoring this event. And I should also apologize for some technical problems during the webinar, but just to let you know that we will make a proper arrangements of whole webinar, and it will be available on YouTube. We will send a special newsletter shortly. So thanks all the audience, thanks all the speakers, panelists, thanks Anthony, thanks to Port of Gdynia, and please follow us. I hope we could meet someday on a real life, but until then we will try to make webinars and tackle interesting topics for the port market. Thank you again. See you soon. Thank you.